Hello everybody, and thank you for joining us today on this Sunday. I am Katy Neale from Borehamwood Physio and welcome to my clinic. It's nice to see some familiar faces joining us again on Zoom and I know on Facebook Live, but for those of you that are tuning in live for the first time or watching this on playback, let me tell you a little bit more about myself. I have over 18 years as a physio and you are tuned into the fifth of our running sessions that I am hosting with Gemma Bitaraf, who is a brilliant coach. All of the previous sessions have been uploaded onto YouTube, Katy Neale Physio and Pilates, and can also be found on the Facebook group Borehamwood Physio. We've been really focusing on sessions to try and help you all as runners, and if you haven't tuned in, you may want to go and watch some back. We've talked about marathon runners and new runners, and each session has a talk by Gemma and then a bit of a practical session by me looking at strengthening. And today, really importantly, we're going to focus on balance drills and why that's important. Today, this session is about those other factors that you may not be aware of to do with how you influence your running. It's a really interesting talk, and I think if you're really invested in running and doing things that are a little bit different, the more you know and the more thoughts that you have, the better you can be at your skill or your craft. So I'm going to hand over to Gemma, who is going to take the next part of the session, and then we're going to come back to me. Got my wobble cushion ready, you can see some marks on the floor, and we're going to go through some really cool balance stuff together. All right, over to you, Gemma.
Thanks, Katy. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a qualified England athletics coach and one of the head coaches at the local club in Hemel, Gade Valley Harriers. I've been working with runners for about probably over 10 years now, actually, from beginners to competitive runners. And my focus is really to help them understand their training and work out how they can influence some of their goals, whether it's performance or health related. I love working with Katy and other professionals to give runners like an all-round experience really, and give them some advice to try and support and inspire them throughout their training. Now today we're going to talk about factors that you can implement to influence your running. I'm not going to talk about any training strategies, although there's probably a little bit of crossover there. So we're going to think about all the other things that you can do to influence your running. I believe it's human nature really to want to constantly challenge and improve ourselves. And this is probably why we may have become a runner in the first place. So it's only natural that we're always on the lookout for ways to improve our running. We automatically think about wanting to improve our pace or distance and assume that it can only be done through training, so usually running faster or further. But what if we thought about just becoming a better all-round runner? Katy and I are always reminding people that if running is so important to you, why wouldn't you do everything you could to ensure you could enjoy it for as long as possible and be the best that you can be? And it's not always about just pure training, the training aspect. So today I'm going to talk about some of the factors that you can change or implement to influence your running. I think some of them might be quite obvious actually, so obvious that you're probably already doing them, and others maybe not quite so much, but I'm hoping there's a couple of things that you can take from today which make a positive impact to your running. Now, I thought about this all week. I'm always making notes or recording voice memos on my phone, and I've tried to keep it to 10 things. I fully admit that some of the things I've merged together to keep it into the 10. But if we've got time at the end or even during in the chat box, it might be quite nice to hear from you if there's anything you feel has particularly influenced your running. Hopefully in a positive way, but maybe it wasn't positive originally and it turned into something positive. So here we go. The first one, know your strengths and weaknesses. So ask yourself what you're good at running and what you feel you might want to improve on. Don't just think about the obvious things. So a strength that you have in your running could be that you have really good consistent pace, whatever that might be. You might be really good at motivating others when you run in a group, or you might be willing to run whatever the weather and staying really motivated when it gets tough. Think about the things you're not so good at, so your weaknesses, and how they will improve the type of running you currently do. Now, this is quite different to what you think you need to work on because you've seen other people doing it. So I really want to try and make you think about that relevance to you. What do you want to work on, not what do you think you should be working on? Now, I know and fully admit we're not always really motivated to address those weaknesses because it's really hard. It's much easier to just keep concentrating on the things we're good at. And if you don't have a reason to address them, if you don't find a reason, then it's even tougher. So try and find a reason that you want to address those weaknesses. It might be as simple as when we are allowed to run with other people, that you want to be the one who's saying all those positive things as you run up the hill and motivate other people, rather than being the one that's always looking to someone else for motivation. Set a goal. I'm always talking about goals, but without a goal, it's actually much harder to stay motivated. Most people choose an event or a distance to train for, and that's really good. It doesn't always need to be your goal, and currently it's not actually possible, and it might not be for some time to come. So when you're thinking about goals, you could take some time to identify some of those weaknesses I just talked about a moment ago and be quite specific about it. So I came up with an example. By July, I want to feel more confident when I run off-road, and I want to be able to plan my own routes. So think about how you might achieve this. You might learn from other people. You might take time to look at some of these routes. You might start off just with some shorter off-road sections that you're used to and build up from there. And how will you know when you've achieved that? Think about that. And don't forget to set those mini goals as well. So every time you put your running shoes on, be quite clear about what you want to achieve by the time you finish your run. It doesn't always need to be performance related. It might be that you want to just clear your head. You want to focus on really good form, or your breathing, staying relaxed. Or maybe you're testing out some new nutrition that you've tried to see if it will work on one of your longer runs. I think by setting mini goals, and they don't need to be big, that you'll feel like you've achieved something every time you finish a run, rather than just going out for a set pace or a distance. And celebrate the small things. So I think hopefully you can all go along with this, but things don't always go to plan, and it's inevitable that we won't always feel amazing on each of our runs. So I talk about this a lot, but start a running diary and note down those areas that you want to focus on. It means you can look back and you can see just small improvements that you might otherwise have forgotten. I also think don't play down your achievements, even to yourself. It's quite easy to get into a habit of saying something like, I felt really strong up that hill today. At the beginning of the run, it was brilliant, but I still struggled at the end. And I just feel like you ended on a bit of a negative, when actually the fact that you felt strong at the beginning is excellent. So I think stop there, congratulate yourself on that, and then build on it next time. Now try and mix it up, mix your training up, and mix different types of things up. So don't try to cram too much into what can sometimes be a busy and actually currently disrupted lifestyle. So decide what you can realistically do and be prepared to change that. Not every run that you go out on needs to be a repeat of the previous one, but just faster and further. If you're a bit pushed for time, you can just, instead of ditching your run completely, you could just go out for 20 minutes and concentrate on your breathing. Come back and know that that's a mini goal that you focused on. Or you want to improve your hill running, you could go out and just tackle the hill that you struggled on last time, just maybe a couple of times. You'll be back home in 20 minutes and you still achieve something. Or if the weather's not brilliant, you might want to put your trail shoes on and grow some of that confidence and strength by running off-road and in sort of tricky conditions. I also talk about this with some of my athletes, actually. Possibly not so relevant now, or maybe more relevant, but don't try and get a particular number or type of runs into a 7-day schedule. I think we were quite fixated on this weekly schedule, which is brilliant. I like to have a schedule and a plan. But what if you change that schedule to every 10 days or maybe every 14. It meant that the runs you were planning to do in the 7, you have a lot more time now, and you just have a cycle of 10 days instead of 7. It suddenly feels like a lot less pressure, really. An example of this type of mixing it up and kind of pressure, as an example, we have a rep session, a hard session on a Tuesday at the local running club, or we did, and we will when things go back to maybe slightly more normal. And I had a runner who was quite capable of doing the sessions. Every time she would report good times, she was doing really well. But for some reason, she'd always come back in her notes and say that she felt terrible and it wasn't going well and what could she do. When we talked about it more, I realised that actually she was trying to cram so much in before she turned up to the session that she started off just feeling really stressed. And just by changing things a little bit, by me saying to her, it's okay if you don't start on time, come 15 minutes later and start when you feel, warm up and then get going. She just had a much better session. She may have finished and done maybe one less rep than everyone else, but actually she got a much more positive feeling from it. And I'm sure that loads of times, and I'm not sure whether this happens more or less at the moment, but you've said to yourself, I need to be out the door exactly 9:30 on the dot. And the routine's good, and sometimes it's absolutely necessary. But now, what if you didn't have that pressure to get out the door at 9:30 and you ran at 9:47? Would anything bad happen? Probably not. So be prepared to sort of change things and mix things up a bit, and don't put that pressure on yourselves. Take recovery seriously. We have sort of alluded to this before, but most people think of recovery as a time when you're losing your fitness, and actually that couldn't be further from the truth. During recovery, your bodies are actually adapting to all of that training that we put them under over the last however many weeks. And as they rebuild, they become stronger and more able to cope next time you run. If you run too much or you overtrain, you actually risk becoming demotivated and not adapting, and maybe picking up an injury because your body is unable to cope with that. So I think make your easy days really easy, and it means your hard days can be quite hard. Now, during lockdown, actually, you need to think about your overall life stress, and it might mean that what you considered to be an easy run a couple of months ago is now actually one of your harder runs. So don't be too tough on yourself. Be prepared to make those easy days really, really easy. Don't fill them with lots of other activities that actually mean it's not a recovery day at all. And I think celebrate your recovery days. If you're someone who likes to plan, then you can plan recovery as part of your training. Write it in your training diary. It is part of your training, it's not an aside. And you can also make your recovery have goals. I spoke to a runner this week, and she's actually coming up to a recovery week next week. We give her a lot less intensity for the week. And I asked her what she wanted to get out of it. And it wasn't really to do with training. She just said, I'd like to spend more time with my partner. I'd like to really enjoy walking the dog. I'm going to do some training with my dog. And I want to feel that by the end of that recovery week, I can't wait to put my trainers on again and get back into training. So make some goals for your recovery days and weeks as well. Now, also remember to take time off completely. So this is slightly different to recovery. Running can take up quite a lot of time, which can impact your life, maybe friends and family as well. So I sometimes tell my runners just to forget they're a runner and do something completely different, so that next time, like I said about the example with the lady I'm training at the moment, you feel ready to get back to running. Know when to stop. I had to think about this the other day, and it's kind of linked to recovery. As runners, or any endurance athlete actually, we're really used to working hard, we're used to doing that, and we've probably created some quite good mental and physical strategies to get through these barriers. I wouldn't normally encourage athletes to adopt those strategies when they need them, and they might need them in times of hard training or racing, but they can also be our downfall, really. There might be times when you are able to push through a certain run, hit your markers, so that might be pace or distance, but actually the run's quite unproductive. It's really hard to do, but be prepared to stop. So a strategy you might give yourself is that you give yourself a time limit, so say 10, 15 minutes. And if you still, after that time, don't feel really ready to continue running, then stop, jog home, and be really confident that actually that had a positive impact on your running. And the days preceding that, your mind and your body will thank you for it. As an aside, actually, lots of runners have fancy watches now, and they're really great. They have lots of training benefits, but they can also be a hindrance at a really basic level. You could be feeling great, you have a brilliant run. How many times have you looked down at your watch and you thought, oh, I wasn't running quite as quickly as I thought I was there, and suddenly you feel really demotivated. And at an advanced level, the watches actually tell us whether we've been productive or unproductive. And that's really not a great motivator at all. So these watches, they do have a place, and some of the metrics can be quite accurate and useful, but don't rely solely on them. I actually advocate and ask my runners to go out either without a watch, which is, I can't think of anyone who agrees to that actually, but maybe just that they have just the time on their watch. They don't see anything else. So actually it's a really good exercise to do that. Finish your run, ask yourself how you really felt about that run, and then if you want to, you can come back and look at those metrics, but just be confident on your sort of original reflections on that. You don't always need to then look at the stats and compare to what you did last time. Now, don't forget the basics. So you've heard Katie and I talk about stretching, mobility, strength, running drills. I know that as runners, we often see them as an aside or boring or not directly contributing to our running, but actually they form the basis of good running. Now's a really good time to start to implement them. It doesn't need to be all at once. Again, we talked about this before. Make it achievable for you. Go online, find a video of something that you might feel benefits your run, and see if you can set a goal to maybe fit that into your week, maybe just once or twice for 10 minutes. You can build on that, and then you can create a new routine around these basics. They will actually improve your running form, which does lead to an increase in performance. And at times, or at a time at the moment, it might not actually be possible to push our training to get greater performance. So one thing we could do is really concentrate on these basics. And for those of you who attended the strength webinar, you'll know how important this strength work is to our running performance, and most importantly, reducing your risk of injury up to 50%. We can't go to the gym at the moment, but we can set aside some time at home to start or continue your strength routine. So just like the basics work I talked about, your stretching, your mobility, your running drills, you can set an expectation for this strength work, which is achievable for you, and you can build on it over time. If you wanted to find a bit more information about strength, then you can look back on the webinar about strength training. There's lots of good information in there. Nail your nutrition. I love this subject, and actually we're going to go into it in much more detail next week, but you can start thinking about it now. So are you eating, I'm going to say well, there's lots of factors in well, but before or after your run? Everybody's different, so establish what works for you. If you've written down in your diary that you felt amazing, what did you eat before that run? It may have had an influence on that. And the day where you felt not so good, what did you eat before? Or possibly, what did you even eat after your last run? Because maybe it wasn't enough or the right type of food to help your body recover. If you're not sure what works for you, as I said, write it down. You'll soon start to see some patterns in foods that make you feel great when you run, and some that really don't make you feel great. And don't just look for some serious reactions like feeling sick or unwell. It might just be that you feel tired or sluggish, or actually you're quite hungry or craving something. We would call that a negative food reaction. And it normally means that your body just isn't in agreement or full agreement with the choices you made. So maybe thinking about your nutrition might be one of the goals that you could do that I talked about earlier. And I think next week we've got the nutrition webinar, so join us for that, because we're going to go into it in much more detail. My next topic was get organised. It might be slightly less relevant in the current circumstances. I know we talked about going out at 9:30 versus 9:45, but just think, how many times have you felt either stressed or not gone for a run because the path to get there, to get out of the door, just didn't feel very smooth at all? You might have planned to go, if you do plan to go for a run at any point in the day, just make sure it can happen as easily as possible. So it might, really simple things, but check the weather, check the temperature. You may think it's a great day outside, really sunny, but actually you've got out and it's cold. Have you got the right kit? There's nothing worse than being on a run and you're either too hot, too cold, you've got wet, or you just weren't prepared for it. And be organised for when you return from that run. So if you need to refuel afterwards, have it ready so that when you get back, you don't dive into the biscuit tin. I know we've all done that, and sometimes it's perfectly acceptable, but other times you might not want to do that. So do the preparation for your main meals. It might be your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner, so that when you return from your run, the transition back through the door and your stress levels is really low, and you know, things, you don't walk back through the door and instantly feel stressed and undo all of that hard work you did when you were out on your run. I've even got some athletes who actually have their kit laid out and their recovery drink, so it's ready to go at any time of the day, and it just means they can transition into going for a run just as easily as possible. They haven't got to dig all their kit out and find that their trainers are wet from yesterday, etc. So if that's something that you feel you need to work on, start with that. Just get your kit ready so it's always ready for you to run whenever you want to. This is my last thing actually, but don't compare yourself to other runners. We, as runners, it is sometimes a competitive world that we live in, and it's quite easy to become disheartened when you look at others, they're running faster, further, or what you might deem as training harder. Remember, they're not always training harder, but take a step back from that and concentrate on just you. So look at where you started, look how far you've come, and be really proud of that. I think most days, for just putting on your shoes and going out for a run, you're probably well ahead of quite a few people. There's also lots of information out there for runners, and it's great. I would encourage you to get as much of that information as you can. But if you read something or receive some advice, and including from myself, that really fundamentally doesn't feel right or fit right with you, it's probably not right for you at that time. So I think by all means, go out and experience new things, but don't blindly follow something, a training plan or some sort of running method that you picked up or someone said, and clearly after a couple of weeks it's just not working for you. You need to learn to listen to what will work for you. Equally, there are lots of people out there who give great advice. It may just be other runners, it might be professionals, but I have a sort of a belief in this, that if anyone has a particularly strong opinion on something and they're not willing to listen or to take viewpoints from others, then maybe that's not quite the right advice for you to take, or at least you want to spend some time considering it. Most coaches, including myself, will always work and collaborate with other coaches to get the best advice for a runner. So you might have two runners that are both working on getting their, that have the same goal. So they're working on getting their 5K time down. They want to get a park run PB. But the path they take to get there will be quite different. And that's important to recognise. You may be working on the same goal as someone else, either a friend or someone in your family, but the path you take to get there might be quite different. So equally, don't be shy in sharing your good and bad experiences of running. We all started somewhere. Sometimes it's nice to share that story with other people. The story that you tell about your running might be something that someone else can relate to, and it gives them the boost when they're comparing themselves to others and maybe not feeling so great. I also think when you're sharing your running story, be really positive about it, own it. Your achievement might not be relevant to someone else, but if you show real passion and desire for that and share your personal journey, I think you'll really engage with someone else and encourage them on their journey. I can't think of a time when I've read something a runner's achieved and I may or may not have achieved that, but the way they told it, I just felt really inspired by the way they described it to me. So in summary, there's lots of things to think about, probably a lot more than I've mentioned today actually, that you can do to influence your running. And it's not just about training harder. Now is actually a really good time to start thinking about these things. And remember to pick areas that are going to work for you, not just areas that you think you should be working on because someone else is. So take some time to work out some short, medium and long-term goals, which again aren't just based around performance, distance or time. Don't neglect your recovery or your nutrition. Those two things together, or just one, they could have the biggest impact on your training for possibly the least amount of input or change. And don't blindly follow advice from someone else or technology. Learn to read your body and adapt your training around that. And remember that running's really important to you, so give it the time and energy that it deserves outside of just training harder. I hope that was useful for everyone. I'd quite like at the end of the Q&A to maybe pick up some ideas of things that have helped you guys in your running, because there's probably some things there that I haven't thought about. I tried to keep the list fairly small, but hopefully we can talk about that at the Q&A. Hopefully Katie's ready also she is to do some balance work with us. I think maybe it's good that we've all got our cameras turned off, because if we're all trying this, then lots of things could happen. So Katie, I will hand over to you and I'll come back and speak to everyone at the end for a bit of a Q&A. Thanks everyone for listening. Katie, you just need to unmute.
Joys of live technology. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Gemma, for that. And as always, Gemma said that it is multifactorial, and it is really good to sit down and plan. And I know there's been a lot of information, but on those days that you just don't feel kind of up for running and you're not sure why, but maybe your intuition is saying that you need to stop, but you're a little bit guilty about, oh, I should be doing something, that's a really good time to do some of this planning. And I know there is a question that we'll come to afterwards, which is about how do you actually do it? How do you plan your strength, your recovery and all your runs in a 7-day cycle? And we'll talk about that during the question and answers, because then we can help you a little bit more specifically. So welcome to the second part of the session, which is about balance. Now, what's really important is that I have done another balance video that is uploaded, and that was done at the end of last week, and that is kind of basic balance skills. So if you have an injury, if there is something more going on, as always, please seek medical advice at someone that's a professional that you know. If you know that you would class yourself as having poor balance, this is kind of definitely much more an advanced stage. So don't just jump straight into this. It is quite interesting. People, as soon as I start balance sessions, a bit of a game, so people can get quite addicted. It's quite self-competitive. So with anything that we're doing here, it isn't something that you're necessarily doing every day, maybe just a few times a week. What we're talking about with balance is this aspect of control, and control means the stability and strength kind of actually affects our core, in our hips, our knees, our ankles, and maybe any other part of muscles in your legs. As you know, if you've joined in any of our sessions where we're talking about rehab, we're really looking at symmetry. We're looking at single leg strength, because running is one of those sports we're doing lots of stuff on single legs. And the simplest thing to think about is we want the legs to be as similar as possible. Now, some of the tests that I'm going to mention are what we call gold standard tests. So, you know, professional athletes, physios will use versions of this to screen if someone can go back to their sport. And they're kind of stats to do with, are they 4 centimetres apart? Are they within 10% of each other? As someone at home, you're really looking to do this as kind of symmetrical as possible. The reason it's important is, one, some people are struggling with one leg versus the other. The other thing is, some of you may have had an injury in the past and never quite got your balance back. When we look at balance, sometimes my clients will talk about this feeling of heaviness, this lack of responsiveness in one side compared to another, and that can just be that sense of lack of stability. So why is stability important? Well, one, we want to prevent you spraining your ankle, spraining your knee, twisting your back, because one leg isn't that stable compared to the other. The other thing is, if we talked about this when we talked about kind of our hip abductors, if we're corkscrewing all over the place on one leg, if our knee is really drifting in a huge amount on one side compared to the other, that can lead to problems and other injuries in other areas. So the simplest way to start off with balance is, can you stand on one leg? Now, the reality of me demoing this is demoing balance live with no second takes probably means that I'm probably going to fall over at some point. So I can do this. The other thing that would be useful for you if you want to have a look, you know, I'm not a physio, but I'm also a person with my own injuries and bits and pieces. So my left leg is definitely weaker than my right leg. And maybe you'll pick that up as you watch me kind of demo some stuff. So no pressure. So the first thing is really, really simple. Can you stand on one leg? Really simple. Can you stand on one leg? How long can you stand for? And if you're running, this should be really, really easy, to the extent that you can kind of move your arms. And all I'm doing by this is actually distracting my brain. So can I do stuff to distract my brain and allow myself to stay stable? When you can do this all in trainers, the actual tests are done barefoot, just because that increases the challenge. Sometimes as a physio, we will make a decision that someone does need to do it in trainers if we've specifically thought that they need something called orthotics, which is a little bit more of a health professional review of that patient. So standing on one leg, you can do that. Pass that test, aiming for at least 30 seconds, definitely trying to get up to 60 seconds. The next thing that you have is, you can see this kind of star on the floor. Now, they will talk about a star which is 6 to kind of 8 feet long with each stripe. In reality, you won't see me be able to do that here. And sometimes we're looking at really high level athletes with a huge amount of flexibility to have it that long. You can also do this quite visually. The other thing that you want to get hold of, and I'm just going to grab something from my drawer, is like, for one of the tests, like a pen or a little ball. It's quite useful. I'm going to just use 2. The joy of being in a physio room, I've got all of this kit to hand. So one of the tests that we're going to talk about is something called the runner's touch. So the runner's touch is when you're standing on one leg and you're trying to reach forwards as far as you can and touch down with one hand. So hopefully you can see this. What's quite nice is just to mark it. So if you're at home, something where your finger is, or you can drop a pen down. I don't know why I've picked a ball, because this is probably going to roll. So just have a watch. Again, I can do this normally without pressure. So I'm standing on one leg. I'm going to reach forward as far as I can and come back up. Now, some degree of wobbling is absolutely fine, because the whole point of that is that we do wobble and we can correct ourselves. So if I go to my left side, highly embarrassing now if I fall over. So you can see, I don't know if you can see that on the screen, but there is about that much difference between my left and my right, which is absolutely fine, but I know my left is weaker. Hold on, let me just show you where I pop them. There you go. So let's just come back up again. So something nice and simple. So from here, so I think I may have to adjust it again because otherwise my head's going to get cut off. Glamours of not having a camera assistant. The next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to pick these up. So that's called the runner's touch. So really simply, standing on one leg, trying to reach forwards as far as you can go, touch the floor and come back up. And I can't do that and talk to everyone at the same time and try and look at you. The next test we're going to look at is the Y test. So this is called the STAR test. And really, really important that you don't have a knee injury as you try and do this. So you can see these lines. This is very small. Normally I do this with my bed turned round and it's set up over here. So standing on one leg, you're trying to reach as far as you can along the planes. So that's forwards and back. In terms of your foot, you can literally touch the toes down, but you shouldn't put the foot down. That's a failed test. Then we go side to side. So just there. So for me, actually, it's easier to hover my legs. And then we've got the diagonals. So again. So you can see I'm just picking the points and we're going across. Or I'll change legs now, just give that one a bit of a rest. This is my weaker side. You can go all the way round. And you can see that I'm reaching further tests. And normally you would do this without doing a live session at the same time. Really important to really see, and you can see how much I'm moving. I've got a problem with my ankle on my left side and a bit of a weakness in the hip, but I'm actually quite happy with that. There is a modified version of that called the Y test. Very obvious. You're effectively just using a Y. So if you think about these markers, and again, you can imagine that at home. You stand in the centre, and then what you would look at doing is imagine you're tracing that Y and then crossing over, and it's all this kind of crossing over that's really important, and then going backwards. So those are three. So that's the runner's touch, leaning forward, touching the floor, the STAR test, the Y test. They're kind of quite official tests. What I quite like to do with my runners or anyone who's had an injury is also call out. So when they can do that, I start to be like, okay, tap forward, tap backwards. Because when we're running, there are aspects which aren't predictable, or for any injury or when we're recovering, there's stuff that isn't predictable. So this is all planned, which is great, but having that little bit of unpredictability, that's a good word, really also pushes you to the next stage. So other simple things that you can do, slightly less official, is actually to challenge the surface that you're standing on. Because as you know, if you've been out and about, it's unlikely that the floor or pavement that you're running on is even, and it's the ability to recover from those uneven forces, which is the thing that we want to practice. As always, I suggest doing it first of all with trainers on, and then afterwards kind of taking your trainers off, having a go and looking for that difference. So simple things that you can do is, if you can stand on one leg, get a couple of cushions, pop them on the floor. Can you stand on them? Just see how that is. You'll notice that it's a little bit harder. The other bit of kit that I love, I think lots of physios have favourite bits of kit. I love this, and I think Gemma's going to type in, this is called a wobble mat, or an air stability cushion. They've all come up with different brand names. They're not expensive. A lot of you may have seen kind of wooden boards called wobble boards, which you can have at home. I tend to think that people master them quite quickly. A wobble board is a piece of wood and it's got a central kind of ball on the bottom with a flat bit. And actually, as soon as you figured it out, you can find the balance point really quickly. This is like the home version of what you would find in a gym. And in the gym, they have things called BOSUs. And BOSUs, imagine a visual, but most of us aren't going to have the space or even spend the money on a BOSU. What happens is this is filled with air, which means there isn't a fixed point. So you're always having to work. Now, I am assuming that from what I said at the start that you all have got decent balance. But saying that, please, when you use this, be near something. There's nothing worse than picking up a piece of kit and then falling off. So, wobble mat, 2 legs. I can get onto it now without having to hold on, but for you, you need to do that. And as you can see, I have my thoughts about, you know, sometimes kind of bigger feet, actually it's a bit easier. If you're quite light, then you don't roll it as much, but you're trying to stand. Most people find this quite unnerving, but give it a go a few times and then your body will learn the sensation and you'll be able to get on it. And then again, from there, just kind of wave your arms about, distracting the brain. After that, you can go onto 1 leg. Now, really, really pretty hard to do this on one leg. It would be, if you're just practicing your stability on 1 leg, you just want to hold on and stand. And that may be enough, just standing on 1 leg and holding on. You may want to do what I call tickling the surface, which is this kind of halfway point between gripping and then releasing. Because if you imagine that you're tickling, if you just grab your hand and just kind of tickle your hand, you'll feel that you're kind of having these moments where you're in contact and you're released. So you stand on 1 leg and then you kind of do this tickling thing. So you're not going to fall off and you're going to feel safe. From there, you can go into letting go. And you really need to use your arms and think about it like a tightrope. And then you can kind of step off. Count in your head how long you can do it. If it's something that you've just got, maybe have a few practices before you really try and figure out if there's a left or right difference. So again, I love this bit of kit. It's something I do give to people who are struggling with balance, but they are only ever going to do it on both legs, and they're always going to be holding on. To people who are doing quite high level rehab, where their goal is to be able to kind of do this in the middle of the room, why am I doing this? Okay, and really try and balance. So that's me, and actually just as an example, probably won't be as good, I want you to see it on my weaker leg. So you'll see probably, oh, not having a bad day, but it's much harder for me. And I really did have quite a significant thing going on here, and it is possible to build up and up and up. From here, we can do things quite functional. So as part of training, we can talk about agility drills. So I may get someone to do a circuit, and then at some point as part of their circuit, just come into a balance pose and then step off, or to kind of do something quite dynamic and then come and stand. So again, we're looking at all these varieties, these variabilities, these factors. So this is really key for kind of standing sports. Specifically, my talk about today. Some of you I know who are tuning in are cyclists as well, but this could be something that's more relevant to you day to day. And there are points where if you're standing up on your pedals and you're out of the seat, just having that ability to be stable through one side also connects through your core. If someone can balance on 1 leg, if someone's got strength, then we do look at things like hopping drills. And again, we're looking at 10% difference. And there's certain things that you can do from, I don't have enough space right now, how I'm set up, from hopping up and down on 1 leg, What is your control? What is your landing? The ability to do 3 hops forwards in a row. Can you then hop backwards? Can you hop as if you're crossing over, side to side hopping? And again, we're looking at landing, we're looking at control, really trying to reduce any risk of injury. So that's quite a simple session today. It doesn't take too long. The key part, we've talked about foam rollers, we've talked about stretching, we've talked about strengthening, and we've got balance. And next week, we're going to focus, I'm going to change it up from which we talked about relaxation. I'm actually going to put a session on core into the whole mix, because that's really important as well. So I hope you're finding these really informative and really useful. As I said, if you're having any injuries, just go and find a health professional that you're comfortable with, that they can have a look and see if there's anything more that is going on. Is there anything else you want to add, Gemma, just to that?
No, Katie, it was only to say you covered it really, but realistically, wherever we run, unless we're a track runner, the surface beneath us is uneven. Not just talking about off-road, pretty much on the road or on the pavement is uneven. So it's really important really to sort out some of this balance. I know that I've worked with runners who have had quite specific balance issues, and it's come about either when they've run off-road and they want to try and be more confident there, or sometimes just on the road. The worst case scenario is that, unfortunately, possibly due to a balance issue, that you've fallen over or had an accident, and that really knocks someone's confidence. So if it is something that you feel is limiting you and your running, it would be a great thing to work on. And it's not that difficult to master the basics from stage 1 that I put up all the way to the end. And it might help you in your running in that way, that you just get more confidence in running on all these tricky surfaces that we have on pavement, and best case scenario off-road as well. So thanks, Katie.
Oh, that's a pleasure. And yeah, it is actually one of the simplest things, and most people find it really fun. I think when it comes down to it, we're all a bit of a kid at heart, and anything that's interactive and fun makes us a little bit more committed. So as I said, next week we're going to be talking about core specifically for runners. If any of you want to tune in, the next event, literally starting at 12:30 today, is going to be about slowing down. So one of those factors that Gemma talked about, but the first half of that is going to be an introduction to Pilates, and we're going to be following that with a bit of a mindfulness practice. But you may find that intro to Pilates quite interesting. Next week, as I said, Gemma's going to be talking about nutrition and running, just her insights as a coach, which is going to be really helpful, because I know we've had questions about that being sent to us, and I will go into that core teach. I hope you are having a lovely time with your runs at the moment, that you're taking this time to kind of think about all those factors that could influence it, and use that time between the events all being cancelled to really work on yourself and to try and improve your technique as much as you can and reduce your risk of injury. So I'm Katy Neale from Borehamwood Physio. I'm part of the Physio Academy group, who are a series of clinics that are passionate about helping you really address the root cause of your problems. And hopefully when we come out of lockdown, I'll see some of you in the run clinics that are set up to help you achieve your goals. So bye for now.